Hey, Steve Stretsky here, as always, Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. Getting sort of value and entertainment out of these videos, all I ask that you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Before we dive into this week's video, the Stretsky report for January 2020 has been completely revamped for this year. It is not yet out. But it will be out early next week. So if you're not on that email list to get the report, there's just over 7,000 people on that list now. I highly encourage you to get on there. There's going to be a link in the comment section below where you can sign up for the report for free. But it is going to be significantly better. A ton of information. It's going to be 40-50 page report every single month. So I mean, if you're interested in Vancouver real estate or even Canadian real estate for that matter, I don't think there's going to be a better source of detailed information. So I highly encourage you to check that out. But I wanted to talk on sort of the Vancouver housing market for the month of January. A lot of feedback. My Twitter stream has been absolutely just blowing up over the past week because I went on there to sort of give my thoughts, on the Vancouver housing market, the month it was, the statistics, yada, yada, yada. And I basically said that, we're seeing bidding wars. We're seeing prices rise in some segments, particularly the low end, entry-level condos, entry-level detached homes. And people were really, really upset, saying, "Oh, that's BS. That's not happening. What are you talking about? Look at the MLS benchmark." So there's a couple things to distinguish here, because 18 months ago I was having to convince people on not only Twitter but here on YouTube that prices were in fact falling. Nobody, people didn't want to believe me. You get hate messages, funny comments, and now on the flip side, I'm having to do the reverse and saying, no, prices are in fact rising in some segments, and it's the same sort of feedback. People say, well, yeah, again, look at the MLS benchmark. What's important is that you have to understand rate of change terms. And what does that mean? It basically means how quickly things are changing. So if you look at the MLS benchmark, as I've indicated in these videos probably 100 times, it is a lagging indicator. It's a formula designed to smooth out variations in prices and give you a larger overview of the direction that prices are going in. But the fact of the matter is that lags anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So it's really not a good real-time lagging indicator. But even if you look at it, let's just throw up the condo MLS benchmark for an example. You can clearly see that there was obviously a huge run-up. Prices came down, and you can see that the rate of the decline in prices has been shrinking. So now in January of 2020, the MLS benchmark was only down 1% on a year-over-year basis. What that means is that condo prices are effectively 1% lower than they were in January 2019. So, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what's happened to prices over say the last 3 months, which in fact they actually have been rising. I believe the MLS benchmark for condos rose 0.8% on a month-over-month basis, and it's been doing that for a couple months now. So we are seeing that. And that is because you basically just don't have enough supply right now. New listings are chronically low, and I have my reasons to believe why that's happening. I think that essentially people are deciding to hoard assets in an era of low real negative interest rates. There's really no alternative. You cash out your investment condo and you plug it into the bank at 1%. I think that people are starting to figure it out, that instead of selling, that they're hanging on to it. And so what we're seeing now is basically a drop off in new listings, and bidding wars are back with a vengeance in some segments of the market. So I'm just going to give you some context here, because people get all upset and say, oh, well, what was the price? What was the price? Who cares if there's a bidding war? So again, I track this data, very, very frequently. I have entire platforms set up to basically track all of this data, but I'll just give you some real life examples as well. So for me personally, I've lost, just in the past 2 weeks, I've been outbid, my clients have been outbid on 5 properties in the past 2 weeks. So I might actually get a whiteboard here and start tracking this, and every week I'll just update you on the whiteboard of how many offers that have been lost this year in multiple offers. So for me, running this year, it's at 6, but just in the past 2 weeks, we have 5 that have been lost. And these aren't just like, okay, yeah, you lost by a couple thousand, big deal. I'll give you one example. Old building in East Vancouver, priced at $499. Again, I run my analysis. I think those are generally pretty spot on, and I put the valuation at about $520. That's what I thought fair market value would have been. But I said, okay, well, clients really wanted it. They said, I can't lose this place. I need it. I want it. Again, everybody has their own decision-making process. And I said, okay, well, if you really want it, I think that you're probably going to have to go subject-free and go $546, so $46,000 over the ask, to give us the best realistic shot if you really want this. Again, I clearly said, like, I think you're overpaying, but if you want it, that's probably what it's going to take, because we're probably going to be competing with a lot of people. Anyways, sure enough, 14 offers came in, and the realtor calls me back and says, sorry, like you were in the top 4 in terms of price. And subject free, very great offer. But we had this one guy that just like, it was so good, like we just had to sign it right away. And they paid $600,000. So they paid $100,000 over the asking price on a 40-year-old condo in East Vancouver. And again, I had the fair market value at $520. So these are the situations, I think, that we're starting to get this like fear of missing out. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do as a buyer or even as an agent if somebody wants to grossly overpay for something. If you think the fair market value is $520 and someone's willing to pay $80,000 above that, how do you compete with that? And at the same time, I'm not even convinced of what you tell the client, that if you paid $600,000 for a condo that's worth $520, do you even say congratulations, or do you say congrats, you paid an egregious amount? And the following day, I was in another one-bedroom condo, this one in downtown Vancouver, priced at, I think it was $599. It was $1,050 a square foot it was priced at. And these guys got, again, I thought, maybe it's worth $620 today. And so this one got 20 offers and sold for a new record price of $700,000. So broke a new record in the building. So again, I think that's important to contextualize, because condo prices in downtown Vancouver over the past 18 months dropped about 15%. And now we just set a new record high in that building. So that's certainly the case that's happening, at least in the city of Vancouver, where if you look at it again, for condos, there's less than 3 months of supply. So shouldn't be surprised that that's putting upwards pressure on the prices. Again, I'm not going to say that this is going to continue and that you're in a new bull market, but inventory doesn't change in a month. It doesn't change in 2 months. It takes time for inventory to build. I certainly think eventually it will build, and eventually, this is going to play out along with the rest of the financial markets. But I mean, the same thing you can see is playing out in a lot of these Canadian housing markets. Toronto continues to post new highs, but all you have to do is look at residential mortgage credit growth. That's growing at 6.72% on a 3-month annualized basis. That means Canadians today are borrowing at a faster pace. Mortgage credit is growing faster than it did prior to the B20 mortgage stress test. So this basically tells me that Canadians have essentially absorbed or gotten around or, basically I would say, I think for the most part, mentally absorbed the mortgage stress test, and these guys are still borrowing. And that's what happens when credit is so cheap and nobody wants to hike interest rates. You're in this bull market in financial assets. It doesn't matter what financial asset class you look at, every single one of them is essentially pushed to extremes right now. You can look at, see excesses in the bond market, you can see excesses in the stock market, you can see excesses in private credit, in corporate loans. It doesn't really matter what aspect of the financial landscape that you go to look at. They are all at extreme levels, and Vancouver is just, or Canadian real estate is just one little tiny speck of excess in the global scheme of things. And so I think it's important to understand that, because people ask, well, how can this continue? How can Canadians continue to borrow money when we have record high household debt? House prices are so high, incomes are so low. How can this continue? And I said, like, it's going to continue realistically until you probably get a credit event. So there's going to be some sort of, black swan, credit crunch, and you're probably going to have, I think for Canada, at some point, you're going to have a credit crisis. I don't know when it's going to be. It could be in 3 months. It could be in 3 years. But you're going to have one eventually, and I think that's what's ultimately going to kill the bull market, because you're not going to see central banks cut or raise interest rates significantly. They know that they have created a scenario where there is a record amount of debt and people have become accustomed to cheap money, not just households, but governments and businesses. And so if you meaningfully raise interest rates, I think the last thing you'll have to be worried about, truthfully, is Canadian real estate or Vancouver real estate. That will be a small blow up in what would be a larger blow up. So there's a lot of leverage out there. So that's why you have, basically, don't call it QE, but this is why you have QE4. So that's kind of my view on the market. I am actually quite bullish on the Vancouver housing market. Moving forward here in the next 2 to 3 months, I think to try to look past, in like a 6 to 12 month window, I think is ultimately, as I've said before, it is a fool's game. Try to get the timing of one of these, credit events, I think is extremely difficult. But what you can see is I can look 2 to 3 months ahead and give you a very clear insight in terms of where I see the market. Now, it's important to distinguish. This entire video is important to distinguish that there's a difference right now in the luxury market and in the local market. The local market is where people can borrow and where they can actually borrow because of the B20 mortgage stress test. And then you have this luxury market, which is more dependent on the sort of the offshore flows, which have not only been impacted through Chinese capital controls, weaker economy, now you have the coronavirus. All you have to do is look in Vancouver, ponder this. All you have to do is look at the Vancouver detached housing market and say, for homes that are priced $2 million and up, so let's call those kind of luxury, $2 million and up in Vancouver, there's 20 months of supply for sale. 20 months. For detached homes priced under 1.5, again, across Greater Vancouver, so not just like the city of Vancouver, but Greater Vancouver, for homes priced below 1.5, there's just under 5 months of supply for sale. So you can clearly see where the locals are playing, where they're borrowing money to enter into the housing market. Maybe they have a mortgage helper down below where they can just kind of squeeze in, if they've had some help financially or they add equity into the market. And then you have this sort of $2 million up market where people just can't qualify for it. And unless you have that sort of outside money coming in, that's why you're stuck with 20 months of supply in that market. So the market that I'm sort of bullish on is this local entry level to mid-range market, because there's a sort of a supply and demand imbalance right now. And but the luxury market is still taking a beating. So it's very, very important to distinguish that. But that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. I would give you one parting thoughts on sort of to understand my views on financial markets. I think that I've talked about a lot about these guys, but Variant Perception just did an interview on Real Vision. One of their lead guys there, and he really just talked about how they framework sort of the economy. So, and he basically summarized, to summarize his video, again, I would encourage you to check it out, but he basically said, here at Variant Perception, again, one of the most respected macro research companies, he says, we don't try to predict recessions because it's kind of a fool's game. He's like, we can't look ahead and say, okay, we're in February 2020 and, by September 2020, there's going to be a recession. But he's like, no, what we can look is we can try to look just ahead over the next 2-3 months. And he's like, we can get ahead of the recession because we can see it coming if it's like 2 months out and we can see the data rolling over. But he's like, it's impossible to, call outside of a longer window. For what it's worth, their framework is no recession, They don't really see that, but they do see that obviously there's these incredible imbalances in the global economy that eventually will come home to roost. But until they do, what is the catalyst to stop this bull market? Not just in like Vancouver Canadian real estate, but in all of these financial asset classes. So I think that's important to take into consideration. Anyways, hope that video helped. If it did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. See you next week.